Hello and Happy New Year. Looking back, 2020 was quite the year. And as we look forward to 2021 with hope and optimism, I want to send our collective best wishes from Ann Arbor to all of you around the world. I hope you and your families and your loved ones are healthy, you're safe, and that you've had a truly joyous new year. Today, I'm joined by distinguished Michigan alum Brad Keywell for our RossTalks series. RossTalks is a series of discussions with leaders around the world where we can discuss their defining moments, their careers, their lessons learned along the journey they've been on, their leadership philosophies. It's a place where not only do we focus on the past and learning, but we also gain insights from leaders and innovators about what the future holds. And today we have the privilege of talking with Brad Keywell, a serial entrepreneur, someone who is widely regarded as a visionary, as an innovator. Brad, welcome to RossTalks.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be with you, Scott.
Yeah, likewise. It's great to catch up and see you. And now, Brad, you are a lifelong entrepreneur. You've co-founded, by my count, 9 tech companies. You were named 2019 EY World Entrepreneur of the Year. You founded Chicago Ideas Week. Your latest venture, Uptake, is doing extraordinarily well. You're an entrepreneur, you're an innovator. So my first question, Brad, is really about what I often refer to as defining moments. I'd love to get into your sort of history and your journey and understand what was the moment where you realized or learned that really defined who you are as an entrepreneur. Can you tell us that story?
Well, like I said, thanks for having me, and it's great to be connected, even virtually, to you and also to Michigan alumni and the community globally. My story has a bunch of chapters, I think, in terms of me figuring out who I was versus what I wanted to do in the world. But I think 2 quick chapters. One is the way I think I was seen by my family and in my little community outside of Detroit growing up was through my creativity. Some people have the good fortune of good sports, athletic genes, and other talents. My talent, I think, was not as exciting as that, but it was just being creative and finding some clever ways to, I suppose, make money. But it was more than just making money. It was finding ways to deploy creativity and create in a business sort of way. And my first business when I was 6 or 7, making greeting cards and schlepping them around, convincing stores in my little town to sell my greeting cards. But then you fast forward to a chapter that's become more clear to me actually during COVID. And it's become clear because I decided during this time that I save a lot of letters. I'm a big fan of the written word. And so I've got all these files and all these stuff that I saved, and I decided to go through it in the last year as part of the opportunity, the silver lining of COVID. And in going through it, I found a letter that I wrote to my dad. I wrote it actually sometime when I was in college, trying to figure out whether I wanted to go to law school or not, because I did get into Michigan Law School. And I decided to go to law school, more to learn than to be a lawyer. I was positive I was not going to be a lawyer. But I wrote a letter to my dad that somehow it was returned to me in a way so I could keep it. And the letter was saying, I am positive that I am not going to be a lawyer, even though you want me to. And I'm positive that I can't follow your path. I must create my own. And so when you talk about defining moments, and I looked back at this letter, which I forgot that I had even written it, it was pretty amazing that I was that clear at that age about what I was not going to do. I might not have been able to tell you what I was going to do specifically, or even, with any level of precision, but I was precise about who I was not. And that, I think, is a defining question I find myself asking young people who are discussing with me their life ideas. It's more not who are you, but who are you for sure not, because that'll help you understand who perhaps you are.
Wow. And we often, hear leaders talk about when they're thinking about the visions for their companies, deciding who your company's not going to be and what market you're not going to play in is as important as figuring out where you are going to play. And you've really brought that home in a very personal way about who we are along our own journey and telling our story.
Yeah.
Brad, I would love to just probe on that for a moment. Where do you think you found the courage to define your own path? And I ask that because many of the students that I interact with today, the amount of social comparison that's happening in the sense of, well, my friends are doing this, or my colleagues are doing this, and therefore I should too. Or people early in their career, in their 20s and 30s that are really just beginning to define their chapters and their journey are in many ways caught because they're defining success according to the metrics that other people define success, and really following paths that are defined for them, not by themselves. I'd love to just tap into, where did you find the strength of will, the courage, and the certainty in self to chart your own course forward?
Interesting question. I think that, look, we're all social animals, us humans, and the issue with the current state of the zoo, of the human zoo, is there's just so much social getting in the way of us thinking and considering who we are. So if every second of every day you're simply reacting to some social signal of the day, of the moment, whether it's parents, family, friends, you comparing yourself with classmates, you're just a reactive creature. That's just all you're doing, is reacting versus acting or thinking. And you can look back, 3,000 years to the Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, and you could, even those guys were saying, a good life is a thoughtful, considered life. Though I know for me, when I think back about how I found my clarity, it was not by asking a friend what I should do. And clearly it was not saying to my parents, what should I do? So it was probably at some level philosophical, in that I was really getting, I was exposed to lots of books and lots of thinkers and stories that were not of the moment. I talk about Atlas Shrugged and Ayn Rand, or I talk about a sincere interest in philosophy, not from a school point of view, but just an understanding about what is a good life, or what is not so much happiness, but what is purpose all about. So my encouragement, so the answer to your question is, I think I found strength in the stories of others, but not of the moment. Whether it's biographies or historical thinkers, those voices spoke to me. And then I was pretty active in reaching outside of my social circle or my immediate circle to lots of others, without the fear of saying, well, what if they don't respond to me? I was very, very willing to reach out to anyone and say, what did you do? What do you think? And so the activity of expanding the scope of how you think about yourself, away from where you grew up or all that sort of noise, into a much more historical or broad context, I think becomes a source of strength if you're able to see past the noise of social nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's so important in our society today, whether you're 18 and trying to figure out college, or you're a student in our MBA program, or you're an entrepreneur, you're a business leader, is really being able to block out that noise and define for yourself what's a good life,
Right.
and make sure that you are making choices consistent with your own definition of a good life, as opposed to trying to live to somebody else's expectations or standards and whatnot. And that's, I think, really at the essence of you being an entrepreneur too.
And by the way, it's actually the exercise of entrepreneurship at some level is who are you and who are you not? Like, I can't see myself doing certain things. Therefore, I suppose I've got to create. Similar, when you think about a good life and you think about what voices are worth listening to, it'd be a cool thought to sort of challenge yourself to look at 5 or 10 different philosophies, if you will, philosopher perspectives, and just say, I like this, I don't like that. Even that is a huge step forward to help you understand who you are. So I cut you off, but I just think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. So I'd love to, staying with sort of the psychology of being an entrepreneur in some basic sense. One of the things I'm really fascinated by is the psychology of risk. And you could think about risk in terms of, career paths and the journeys that we're all on. You could think about risk in business terms, and being an entrepreneur and taking the risk, the business risk. So I'd like to ask this. So when you think about risk, how do you process risk when you're exploring or thinking about new ideas and new opportunities? I mean, you've started and been successful with so many different companies over and over and over again, and each one has been a different version of risk. How do you think about risk when you're looking at new opportunities and new ideas that you might pursue?
First is I put risk front and center of what I'm thinking about versus reward. The thing we can control more often than not, in my opinion, is risk. And we can take action to mitigate risk. Sometimes the reward is a matter of timing, a matter of circumstance. But I think what binds entrepreneurs very strongly is an orientation of understanding risk. I learned from one of the masters, Sam Zell, who I met when I was in Ann Arbor when I was 17, and has gone from a mentor, I suppose, to still a mentor, but now a dear friend. And one of the things I've learned from Sam is understanding risk and reward, and appropriately calibrating risk in relationship to reward is the job of the entrepreneur, period. Everything else comes after that. And so much so that it provokes this thought. We often study and obsess and calibrate reward, and then we talk about risk a little bit. Well, because it's scary, uncomfortable, not fun necessarily. It might threaten us. I think a much more productive idea is, what's the risk? How do you calibrate the risk? What's your ability to mitigate the risk? What's a consequence of the risk? And oh, by the way, do you get paid enough reward based upon the risk you're taking? And if you can get emotion out of the way and start to focus on the true risk of the idea, let's say, in relationship to the reward, then you can take good entrepreneurial bets. Because whether the risk is signing a personal guarantee where if you fail, it's like a black mark on you forever, or whether the risk is I'm going to try something, and if it doesn't work, at least I'll be a better person or a better operator because of that attempt. Those are levels of risk that you are best off to really understand. And there's lots of mental models of how to do it, but just being comfortable with, you're gonna fail, you're gonna screw around a lot in terms of figuring things out before you get it right. Why not do it in a way where you're not risking your life? with a high degree of possible badness? Why not risk where, as Bezos would say, it's two-way doors as often as possible. You can sort of come back and try another door as often as possible, so that you can figure out in a short period of time where there is a zone of great reward, and you can walk right through that good door towards something great.
Yeah, and I'd love to tap into this a little bit more. When you look back at the many chapters of your journey thus far, and you look at the bets that you've placed and the opportunities that you've pursued, what do you think is among the biggest risks that you've taken in your career? And what is the story of that risk? How did you think about it? Did it become a two-way door in some form or another?
Well, here's one. I mean, one risk was, like I said, I went to business school and then straight to law school. And speaking of Sam Zell, Sam had a bunch of job offers and investment banks and law firms, investment banks, and then the best of all was Sam Zell offering me to join his world right out after law school. And the idea that I would say no to what at the time was just an opportunity that didn't exist. There was no job listing for that job. It was, everything about it was so extraordinary. The risk was saying to this mentor and sort of icon in my life, saying, I don't want to work. That's not me. I'm taking the journey. That's a one, look, it's the two-way doors that our relationship, didn't suffer because of that. The one-way door is, I'm going to go do something really hard. It's almost too easy to take a job. I got to go take that journey of learning. I got to walk in the valley. That was a risk. And by the way, I've had huge successes and huge failures, so it's not all good. But I think now when I think about risk and about new things, I have a process. It's not necessarily a formal process that you might have in a textbook, but it is somewhat formal in how I think about opportunities and how I sort of investigate my ideas, because I have lots and lots of ideas. Most of them aren't so good. My orientation is, I love that they're not so good. Like, amazing. Here's an idea and it's not good. Let's just get rid of it and go to the next one.
That's
and
right.
then
Keep playing.
let's keep going. And also, what about it is not good? What about it is good? How do I record my ideas about what's good about my ideas? So there's something good about every idea. Likely it's the idea itself is bad. But if you can figure out the little things that are good, you build literally a mental model about what you're good at and what you love to do. I say to my kids who are now in their young 20s thinking about life, and I say to lots of young people who I speak with, what are you excellent at? What are you horrible at? It's okay to be horrible at things or to hate certain things. And it's okay to love certain things, even if none of your friends love them. What makes you you? And if you don't know, let's start playing the game. If I gave you 20 things and you had to say from a scale of 1 to 10, what are you a 10 at? What are you a 1? You can't be all 10 and you can't be all 1 either. And that's how I think about my ideas. And ultimately, when I have an idea that I then ultimately act on, odds are it survived a pretty brutal process of being dissected and investigated, so that in the case of Uptake, when I started Uptake, I was positive that I had to start Uptake. There was just a sense of it was a 2-year process of like, what am I missing? Why? This is it sort of survived over and over a refinement process, so that when I started it, I could see the end zone. I mean, it was clear. Even though I was just on my own 20, I saw that end zone clearly, and I've been sort of, driving the ball towards it with a clarity that traces back to the very beginning of saying, you know what, I got to do this one.
Yeah. Now you mentioned uptake, so I'd love to explore more, both in terms of the seed of where uptake came from, and how you are looking at AI technologies and our future. So could you just briefly talk about, like, so where did you had this vision that I have to start uptake, I have to do this. Where did that come from, and why?
Well, it started with a conviction that I have now more than ever, that there are certain things in the world of technology that are best done entrepreneurially and not by big companies or massive consulting firms. Number one. Number two is I had a belief, I'll spare the details, but my belief is that things, machines, assets in our world, given that they now provide data from sensors and otherwise, that those machines are going to unleash a level of precision activity that defies any process-related action. In other words, all of business theory, if you think about what I studied in business school, was about the processes, and better process equals better outcomes. Why was it not better precision? Well, you couldn't have precision. Everything was about like the production line was a process approach to making cars. Well, what if you knew everything about every machine that was making the cars, and every machine was calibrated down to every possible, if you were superhuman, there'd be nothing would ever break, because at least it would be optimal in activity, because you had access to things like the vibration of a machine. The minute it was operating and out of calibration, you would know it. So you could eliminate so many quality issues that simply process enhancement doesn't really address. So the idea of precision-based machine activity, people can maintain and operate machines, be it on-road trucks, construction equipment, mining equipment, manufacturing floors. That to me seemed obvious. But then who was going to provide that to the world? Also, to me, perhaps uniquely, or somewhat uniquely, I viewed that that's best done entrepreneurially versus as a division of a big company. Building software that helps all operators in the world do something better, in my opinion, was a job, an entrepreneurial job, so that it was neutral against, if you will, or neutral no matter what machine brand you had, no matter what the activity on your manufacturing floor, there was a neutral provider who could help oversee everyone. Because otherwise, if GE is the one giving you all the software, well, GE is going to want to help GE. But who's in favor of the operator of everything? And that became the clarity. You have to have an entrepreneurial approach if you're trying to be a layer on top of all these different brands of assets, brands of machines, makers of components, et cetera. And that became uptake. And so uptake really, our vision is let's find the best people. The more idiosyncratic our team, the better. The more perspectives of how to solve problems that are hard to solve, the better, so that we can solve really hard problems, all in favor of the activity of production, of utilization of machines on Earth. And it's been this thrilling journey.
What a wild ride. And it really speaks to the value of diversity of perspectives and backgrounds, and how you bring those together to really produce creative solutions to really important problems. And to that end, congratulations on uptake now last year, 2020, being named as one of the most innovative companies out there. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
I'd love to, you're essentially in the AI technology business, looking at precision in machines. And there's a lot of discussion and debate about AI and machine learning generally, and what some will refer to as responsible AI. And you know, concerns across different sectors of society, worried about different technologies making decisions and introducing biases into how those decisions are made, whether you're in business or healthcare or otherwise. Being in the AI technology space, how do you think about these technologies and how to design them in ways that have a responsibility lens to them? How do you think about that and that debate that's ongoing in our society today?
I think what's interesting is there's a professor at Harvard named Michael Sandel, and he teaches the most popular course at Harvard. It's about moral choices. I met him. We brought him to Chicago for Chicago Ideas a number of years ago, and his course is available online. And I'm fascinated by this guy. And he talks about the choices that you're referring to, Scott, about how do you deploy technology for good and not for bad, for good or on evil, let's say. And we've had technology, perhaps a lot less digital, forever. I mean, I think about like the essay or the GMAT or SAT or ACT. That's technology. You put pencil on a form and then they put it in a thing and it tells you the thing. We deployed that technology for pretty good use. But what if people could not afford pencils and only the elite had pencils? That wouldn't be a good way to deploy technology. My point is that like there's technology just as radically productive and pervasive as we now have, clearly makes these moral choices and trade-offs of a good versus evil more extreme. It sort of brings forward how radical we could use all this for good or bad. My perspective on it is the technologists are simply carrying the balls forward into and putting these opportunities for good or opportunities for bad in the hands of lots of people. I don't think the answer is don't bring opportunity forward. I think it's people are people. Our societies around the world are all choosing how to be. And so in certain, I mean, look, China has one perspective about how their society should be. We have a different perspective about how the American society should be in regards to surveillance, in regards to sort of always on knowledge about every human being and how to use it. But I think that that doesn't get in the way of that there's possibility for bad actors. Doesn't mean stop acting. What it means is really check in on who we want to be. And as a provider of, the easy thing for me and for Uptake is we simply make machines work better. So it's easy on this one. We make wind turbines. If wind turbines have Uptake powering them, they make more energy. Simple as that. If a factory floor is powered by Uptake, it's more productive and less pollutive and less waste of the time. So you can make more stuff in the same amount of time if Uptake is plugged into all your machines. That simplicity makes it easier for us. We make the world more productive, which means more environmentally responsible, and people that are either on the line are more safe, and the drivers of the cars have a better assurance of quality of the car that was made on the factory floor. The harder work is saying, how do you know that the person who's got your social, your consumer level data is not going to use it badly? And the answer is, that's a societal question. That's an important one that we hopefully answer the right way.
Yeah. Brad, every time you and I get the chance to interact in various forums, and every time we chat, I come away with new insights, but also new inspiration. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to wrap and conclude with a question about something you mentioned earlier, and that is about purpose and a sense of purpose. When you think about yourself, your time on this lovely planet that we all have the privilege of living our lives on, how do you think about your own purpose, your own sense of purpose?
This was I think it's a important question to answer, first of all, or to ask. A lot of people think that, or might say, oh, that's a question that's, there might be some judgment of the question itself, as if thinking about purpose is somehow has got some something around that question. Why would you even ask the question? Or who are you to have a purpose, right? That's something that when you're younger, it's an uncomfortable question to think about because you're not really sure. And I answer the question saying, I have thought about it. I was provoked in a great way by a guy named David Allen. David started or created the GTD philosophy, getting things done. He wrote a book, and he's in his mid 70s, and he's become both a friend and I spent a year working with David. About 5 years ago, I basically said, I want to find a way to get more things done with every hour, if you will, or every day of my life. And I said to David, I want to hire you for a year, not full time, but I want you to work with me over the course of a year at length. And early in that process, he said, what's your purpose? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, what's your purpose? Do you have a purpose? I mean, if you don't, then how do you know you're gonna be true to it? And it led to a conversation, and that ultimately got me closer to an understanding about what it means to have this purpose of creating, and how getting over the ego of creating and simply being okay with a purpose that is aligned, being creative, being impactful, and leaving those around you and the world that you are exposed to better off because of you. That's part of what I arrived at after a long period of work on thinking about purpose. And so I sort of respond to your question with that answer, but also with the question to those who are curious about themselves, who are watching this. The question is this: what is your purpose? And then my provocation is, it's worth you asking yourself. And it's not egotistical, and it's not highfalutin to say, what's your purpose? In fact, I think it's one of the more productive things you can do. And the framework would be, you do have a purpose. It is philosophical. It is existential for you personally to define a purpose that you're here. And if you do that, if you go through the sometimes painful process or critical process of like, what's the whole point of this thing, of life, you'll be better off because of it.
Yeah, that is, Brad, such a wonderful and powerful message. And one thing I know to be true about you is you, as an entrepreneur, as a human being, as a family person, make choices in ways that are aligned with your sense of purpose. And what's so powerful about asking ourselves that question is it informs the choices we make. Otherwise, what basis upon which do we make choices in life about how we spend our time, how we spend our energy, where we invest, where we don't invest? It all has to come back to this center, which is this sense of purpose. And so, Brad, from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of everyone at the Ross School of Business and the University of Michigan, your family, your home, I want to thank you for joining me for our Ross Talks. You're a good friend, a wonderful role model, an alum of the University of Michigan, and it is a privilege to get to see you.
Listen, I'll end with this. I'll go right back at you. I've been around Ann Arbor and Michigan, either personally or close, but at a distance physically. Let's see, for 35 years. And I've been acquainted with, part of, or connected to the business school now for nearly 32, 33 years. And this is not just because I'm looking at you right now, Scott. We are lucky to have somebody with your energy and purpose, sense of purpose, commitment philosophically to students and to people being better off because they spend time in Ann Arbor and Michigan at Ross. We're lucky to have someone like you leading the ship. And so taking this chance that I have right now, I really respect you, as you know, and I consider us lucky as a university that you're running our business school, especially in the last year. Having your sense of clarity, we're going to get through it. We're going to do the best we can with the facts and the conditions at hand. And we're going to remain optimistic and calibrate risk, act upon risk, orient towards reward, but mitigate our risk. So all the stuff we've been talking about for the last half hour, boy, are we lucky that you're our leader. So thank you, Scott.
Brad, those words mean the world to me. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And as always and forever, go blue, to everyone who's joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.